So Georgian pivotal elections are being framed as a choice between deepening ties with Western institutions or potentially reinforcing ties with Russia. According to the exit polls, Georgia's ruling party is set to come first. However, the exit polls disagree on who will be able to form a majority, Georgian Dream party or the opposition groups. To discuss the outcome, I am joined here this evening by Oana Popescu-Zamfir, Director, Global Focus Center. Good evening, delighted to have you with us.
Hi, good evening.
So let me start with the exit polls. We have 70% of the votes counted. Georgian Dream seems to be winning. However, it does not mean that they will be able to form a majority in parliament.
It's true, and obviously, I mean, we've all seen the massive protests ahead of elections. I can only imagine we're going to have the same kind of scenes after elections, especially since there have already been accusations of rigging of the vote, aggression over some of the opposition party politicians. So already civil society is accusing the government of essentially stealing the vote. And then we also have the issue of forming a government, and this is a new experience for Georgia, not having an outright parliament majority and government, and having to form a coalition. And we already know that at least one of the parties, that of Georgi Gacharia, has pledged not to form a coalition with the Georgian Dream, but not to form a coalition with the main opposition party either. So it's really, at this point, I think we are into uncharted waters, and we still don't have the final results under the circumstances of conflicting exit polls. So I think at this point, we still cannot really say we know who's won.
Right, and Georgian Dream is known as a pro-Russian party. I mean, it is under the influence of Bidzina Ivanishvili, an oligarch. So my question is, are there doubts already about fairness of these elections? And have people noticed any Russian meddling? Were there any international watchdogs present? What is the state of this?
Oh, absolutely. As I said, there has already been quite significant, a significant number of accusations of vote rigging. Apart from that, if you compare Georgian elections with Moldovan elections that took place last weekend, alongside a referendum for EU accession, to inscribe it in the constitution, we can see traces of coordination of the Russian meddling, even at the level of the campaign preceding the vote. One of the kind of mantras of the pro-Russian forces in Moldova, for instance, was that a vote for pro-European forces and a vote in favor of the EU would automatically mean that Moldova would be dragged into the war against Ukraine. The same, we see the same in Georgia, where the rhetoric was similar on the part of the Georgian Dream. Georgian Dream cast itself as the party of peace, whereas the opposition would drag the country into the war that opposes Russia and Ukraine. So I think we see coordination when it comes to communication, strategic communications. When it comes to disinformation, actually disinformation in Georgia has been a weapon of choice for Russia and its domestic forces aligned with the Kremlin's agenda for years now. We've only seen an intensification during the elections campaign, nothing really new. So what we have essentially, I think, is even more complicated than just a choice between Europe and Russia. What we risk having if the Georgian Dreams wins over 50% of the vote is basically a belt of instability around the EU's borders, where countries like Georgia have made a choice, and actually it's not the countries, it's its government, to align not necessarily with Russia, but to give up on the firm pursuit of pro-European, pro-democratic reform, and rather play a multi-vectorial game where they engage with China, which has an overwhelming presence in Georgia already in strategic infrastructure. They engage with Turkey, with Russia, with the Gulf states, with basically anyone who's willing to pay. And the priority for these governments is not really national interest even, it's actually their own political survival and the survival of the corrupt networks that support them. So if we have a victory of the Georgian Dream tonight, I think we can safely say that we have lost Georgia, we, the Euro-Atlantic community, and we have lost it as we have been increasingly losing our entire neighborhood, and in part because we haven't played a geopolitical game the way we should have played it in front of Russian aggression, and there has been a perception of weakness by European and Euro-Atlantic forces, which has determined these countries to turn to other partners.
So do you expect any unrest following this vote in the country?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's assured because there's a massive pro-European opposition at the level of society, not just the strong civil society that Georgia used to have before the foreign agents law, which basically sees civil society now being de facto in exile. But Georgia has a very pro-European society. Some of them may not have turned out to vote. Some of them may even have voted for the Georgian Dream because there's a paradox that I think is not very well understood at the level of Brussels and Washington, and that is, again, being pro-EU and wishing to partake in the benefits of potential EU accession doesn't mean that Georgians are necessarily happy with EU policies in the country. And rather than the whole election, and again, I'm talking Georgia as well as Moldova, as well as some countries in the Balkans, rather than the whole choice being between Europe and Russia, in many cases, the choice that we see, which may seem anti-European, is actually for fear of Russia, because these countries are looking at the kind of support that we are providing Ukraine, and they see that we are providing enough for Ukraine to resist, but not to win. And they legitimately wonder, well, if Russia were to invade Georgia tomorrow or to invade Moldova tomorrow, would the West be standing up for us more than it does for Ukraine, which is a pivotal, very strategic country for the West? Well, probably not. So then we're on our own and we have to balance everyone. So what that generates is essentially a very high level of polarization within these countries. And I think we're going to see more of this following the elections, taking the form of unrest in the streets and protests by the pro-European opposition against the government and difficulty perhaps in forming a government. So yeah, I expect that for a while things are not going to go smoothly in Georgia.
And what about people such as the president, Zurabishvili, who formed this Georgian charter? Could the opposition do something even if the Georgian Dream claims victory?
Well, it very much depends on the final result. If it's clear enough in favor of the Georgian Dream, I don't see much of a margin of maneuver there. Obviously, there's a scenario that if the Georgian Dream wins by a very narrow margin, there could potentially be a possibility for a coalition of the opposition forces, but that is highly unlikely. We already know that this is difficult to happen, even if the opposition forces win. And the president has very limited room for maneuver, despite her standing by the pro-European voices constantly since the Georgian Dream has started monopolizing power. So frankly speaking, I think there could be some attempts at perhaps playing with the results and trying to find various ways of forming a government. But it's again, depending on the final result, it's difficult if the Georgian Dream wins, and especially since they have the power now. So, at least in this region, especially when you're dealing with a strongman government, whoever has the power will not relinquish it, will not give up the privileges they have.
Absolutely. Oana Popescu-Zamfir, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World News Tonight. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.